Good evening. This is Guitars and Music. We talk about guitar. We talk about great music like we're going to do tonight. Once in a while, review some gear that I used. And I play guitar. You can look through here and find little clips of me playing or doing different things playing the guitar. Tonight we're going to talk about great music, and that is great songwriters. You know, I've got this album right here, Songwriting and Rock. Not just great songwriters, but I've got this album. I thought about it before doing this. It's Come Taste the Band by Deep Purple. It was done right after Ritchie Blackmore quit the band. It's what's considered the Mark IV lineup with Tommy Bolin. It's a great album. You've got the Deep Purple rhythm section, one of the great rock and roll bands in the world. But Ritchie Blackmore, and they got Tommy Bolin, an awesome guitar player. But Ritchie Blackmore had just left the band. They kind of did that album in a hurry. And you know what it doesn't have on it? And maybe why you haven't heard it, like some of the other Deep Purple albums? Doesn't have great songs. The songwriting, when Ritchie Blackmore left, and they didn't have time to put together anything like Woman from Tokyo, Highway Star, Space Truck, and Lazy, you know, Smoke on the Water, all those great songs. And it makes a big difference. Songwriting is really important. So tonight I'm going to do a ranking of the 10 best songwriters in rock. Not the best guitar players, not the best albums, but songwriters. And a couple things I'm going to look for is the longevity of the songwriter. So hopefully someone that has a large catalog, you know, more or less a lifetime legacy of songwriting, unless they were cut short or there's sort of extenuating circumstances like a plane crash or something. But, you know, hopefully someone that's been consistent and written a lot of songs over a lot of long period. The other thing is I had to make some kind of difficult decisions. I thought I made this little list. You can imagine coming up with all the great music that's been written, trying to come up with the 10 best. But one of the things I did is I cut out singer-songwriters. So that just wiped out a lot of the obvious people who are obviously great songwriters, James Taylor, Paul Simon, you know, the list could go on. So, but we're looking at rocks, what we would call classic rock songwriters. Let's go forward. Let's see. Coming in at number 10 is Ray Davies and the Kinks. Ray Davies and the Kinks. You know, the Kinks kind of fell off the radio sometime in the 80s. When I was a kid, they played the Kinks all the time. And the Kinks were one of those British invasion bands that, you know, were kind of, you know, like the Beatles or, you know, all those bands that kind of had that certain look, you know, and the TV show appearance bands. But unlike a lot of those bands, they made the transition to stadium rock in the 70s. And I saw them twice in that period, and they were just great. But Ray Davies is a great songwriter. Of course, you've got like All Day and All the Night. And, you know, You Really Got Me, all the hard rock songs. But he also did some really well-crafted songs, and that's why I put him in here, like Blazing on a Sunday Afternoon, Lola, you know, Waterloo Sunset. Those are such great, nice songs, and, you know, they really show versatility. And like a Blazing on a Sunday Afternoon, it's kind of got that wit and sort of a kind of a cool chord progression, and that's really clever, well done songwriting. That's really professional songwriting craftsmanship. And when I was a kid, a lot of their records that were on the radio, you don't hear much anymore, about like Gallon of Gas, Low Budget, I Wish I Could Fly Like Superman. And Ray Davies was always clever. Celluloid Heroes is such a beautiful song, and it has, you know, like a lot of the great songwriters, a kind of literary quality. And I don't just necessarily mean fancy poetry, but, you know, a way with words that connects and a sense of poignancy. A personal favorite Kinks song is Life on the Road. But Ray Davies is a great songwriter. And in terms of longevity, he has continued. I think he's had some health issues. He didn't always, I think he's had some on and off relationships with his brother Dave. But he's done quite a few things if you look at. Unfortunately, the people don't tend to pay a lot of attention to it. And the Kinks themselves aren't even played that much anymore. But they certainly deserve credit, and he is a great songwriter. Just he's a great performer, a great figure in rock and roll, but he wrote some great songs, you know, in terms of the songwriting craft. Number 9 is Leon Russell. Now, what are you going to say about Leon Russell? Leon Russell is a songwriter on a par, as far as I'm concerned, with Burt Bacharach, Marvin Hamlish, Richard Rodgers from Rodgers and Hammerstein. He wrote sort of like adult, serious, professional songs that could be in any theater or show, or Barbra Streisand or something. And so many people have done his songs that don't look like Leon Russell. Plus, he's a rocker, though, unlike some of those other names I just mentioned. So he'll get out there and write Delta Lady for Joe Cocker and Blues Power for Eric Clapton. But the man was a great songwriter. R.I.P. to Leon Russell. Superstar that the Carpenters did. It's kind of neat to hear Karen Carpenter's just beautiful version of Superstar, then hear Joe Cocker do it on Mad Dogs and Englishmen. It's kind of so much rockier. But those are great songs. And Leon Russell, Lady Blue, those are piano-based songs, and he was just a top-rate songwriter. He's up there with Paul Williams, or any of the people you just associate kind of with pure songwriting. Leon Russell is a great, great songwriter. And sometimes I think these guys, in his case, he's got the long hair. He looked like he maybe worked in a carnival or something, which I like, and maybe you like too. He didn't always get the credit from the mainstream. I think people in the music business knew how good he was, but he was just an absolute fantastic songwriter, Leon Russell. Number 8, John Fogerty from CCR. Of course, CCR has all those radio classics, just one after the other. Now, John Fogerty, you didn't hear too much from him, and I thought about maybe not including him because longevity was part of the criteria. But actually, in the 80s, he did Center Field, Put Me in, Coach, I'm Ready to Play, Old Man is Down the Road, and he's done some other stuff. One of my favorite baseball movies is The Rookie with Dennis Quaid, the story of that high school chemistry teacher and baseball coach that tried out and made the professional, the Tampa Devil Rays or whatever, which was kind of a great story. But John Fogerty's got a song in that, so he's been pretty active. I think he actually had some legal issues where he couldn't play his own songs for a long time because they were copywritten as CCR songs, even though he was the songwriter. So somebody told me once they saw John Fogerty and he got up there and played Proud Mary and said, that just cost me $10,000 to play my own song. So there was a lot of legal stuff that I think is part of the reason you didn't see him play that much. He literally, legally couldn't go out and play any of those songs without it costing him a fortune, which is too bad. That's what happens when lawyers are involved in music. I think we all can pick a finger. But the other thing I wanted to say about CCR, to just show the timeless quality of those songs, there are a lot of people I love, but their songs are kind of associated with them or a certain style. But John Fogerty his songs like Woody Guthrie, Stephen Foster. In 200 years, I could see people sitting around the campfire and singing Lodi, or with those songs will be kind of part of American music for a long time to come. Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Those are such good songs. People will be singing those long after we're all gone, and that's the mark of a good song. So was it number 8? That was John Fogerty. Number 7, this is a good one, and I'm glad I included it. Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. Now, of course, Aerosmith's a great rock and roll band, and they've got the colorful personality. They look great on stage. They're about as cool as you could get, they're in terms of the cool factor, which, I don't think I ever had that enough, but they're cool. And I think we forget that they were a great band. But something else, there are a lot of great bands that play great and look great, which Aerosmith did. But Aerosmith, again, kind of like the Eagles, they have great songs. And you look at all those albums, especially those 70s albums, just great song after great song. Now, one interesting thing, I was going to put down Tyler and Joe Perry. I just almost kind of had them together in my mind. But when I put this together, I looked at the list of all those albums and the track listings. Steven Tyler wrote almost every song they did I know they do some covers like Walking the Dog. Steven Tyler did almost every song they did that wasn't a cover per se. Some of them are written with Brad Whitford, some of them are written with Tom Hamilton, some of them are written with Joe Perry. But the consistent name on all those is Steven Tyler. So I was ready to, say Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, but I looked and it's Steven Tyler. And let me tell you something. I think he's kind of, another case where sometimes people have this kind of larger-than-life, colorful, flamboyant personality. Steven Tyler, like several of the people that are on this list, he's got kind of a colorful backstory that attracts all our attention. And you almost don't take him seriously enough. The man's an awesome rock and roll drummer. And in the beginning, he was a drummer for Aerosmith, and they made a smart move. They pulled him out. They pulled him from the back. It's kind of like Karen Carpenter. They got her from behind the drum. They got him from behind the drums and said, "Get your ass up there in front of the stage and sing. And, you're a good singer." And that was history. But he's a true musician and a songwriter. And Dream On, all those songs are Steven Tyler songs. He wrote in a lot collaboration with other members of the band. But when I looked at it, he was the name that was on every one of those songs. And it wasn't Joe Perry. Joe Perry's on a lot of them, but he's certainly not on, not all of them that I saw. A lot of them were actually, I think, Brad Whitford and Tom Hamilton songs with Steven Tyler's on everything. Other than some of the covers they did, like Train Kept a Rollin' or something. So it's another example. Just because someone's got long hair and goes, that doesn't mean he's stupid. People don't take musicians seriously, and he's a classic example. That man's a smart man, very smart man. Like everybody on this list, but he's another one that's sort of. He's almost like a clown, like Keith Richards, we almost, at first you say he's great, then you kind of snicker about something or another he did or said. But he's a very smart man, and he's a true musician. He's not just a pretty face and a showman. He's a good musician. Number 6, Ronnie Van Zant from Leonard Skinner. Now, for obvious reasons, that man hasn't written a song since 1977. R.I.P. But another case, you look at all those old Skinner albums, it's just song after song, and you just know every one. All those albums up through Street Survivors, and Ronnie Van Zant's on every one, and a lot of times with other members of the band. So he was writing with every other, there's some songs with Alan Collins, Steve Gaines, Ed King, maybe Gary Rossington and Ronnie Van Zant. But Ronnie Van Zant was on all those songs, and the man was a poet. He was kind of a everyday poet, he wrote, in the plain language of everyday people, which I think endeared him to people. But and words are so important in a song, and he really he wrote some great songs. Today we hear songs like "Sweet Home Alabama" or "Freebird." Again, we almost kind of laugh at them. They've almost become a cliche or even a stereotype about Freebird. Those are great songs, and the lyrics are such an important part of that. And Ronnie Van Zant would write the tunes, I'm sure, along with the guitar players. So that's Ronnie Van Zant. Ronnie Van Zant was a great songwriter, and R.I.P., and he deserves our commemoration and our respect all these years later, because it's kind of like that Deep Purple album. You need someone that can put the songs together, no matter how good your players are. And they had, they had a couple lineup changes, but they always had 3 awesome guitar players, a good boogie band. They added piano, Billy Powell, and but the guy that kind of was the glue that made it good coherent songs, like Simple Man and any of those songs, Saturday Night Special. It was Ronnie Van Zant, and his concept of what a song is, and the way he could take riffs that the guitar players were playing him and kind of turned them into a song that made sense, and stood alone as a song. And it was a great songwriter. Classic example. How many Southern rock bands you see around with great guitars? They do the big long solos. They don't have those good songs that really get you in the heart. And a lot of us, we take that for granted. But when you walk away from a show and you don't remember the songs, it doesn't matter how great the band was. And Ronnie Van Zant was the guy that made Leonard Skinner as great as they were. And I love Leonard Skinner. I respect all those guys, and I'm sure they'd all say that too. I think Ronnie Van Zant was the centerpiece of one of the great bands in American history. Number 5, Don Henley and Glenn Frey of the Eagles. And I know they had some of their great songs. Randy Meisner, I think, wrote "Take It to the Limits," and Joe Walsh wrote some. I think Don Felder wrote "Victim of Love," and I mean, so they've had a lot of great songs. But I think if you look at their catalog, it's Don Henley and Glenn Frey, and again, they're a classic example of how important songs are. And a guy told me that once. This is not to disparage Poco, but a guy made the comparison once with Poco. Poco plays great. They've got several songs I like, and I'm sure if I put on an album I'd like them just fine. In fact, there's kind of an overlay with some of the members of Poco. I think Timothy B. Schmidt and the Eagles. But you know what the Eagles just over time set them apart from all those bands of the 70s that played of that style. And all those bands had great players. They all had, take great solos, sound good on stage, all that kind of thing. But what set the Eagles apart, just as the years went by, was just boom, 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 one song after another, after another. And you go see the Eagles today, if you can afford it, or watch it. If you can't afford it, watch one of their concerts on TV. But it's just classic song after classic song, and somebody had to write those songs. Those aren't cover songs. They almost sound like cover songs to you because you've heard them so much. But Peaceful Easy Feeling, Take It Easy. I mean, don't ever take those songs for granted. They are so well written. They're played great, and they're cool as hell. But before, it's kind of like CCR. People be singing those songs in 200 years. Just as years from now, when people don't know who Don Henley is, and people's hair is different, and everything's different in the world, I hope it's okay. But those songs will still be around in some form or fashion because they're that good. And it's not just a couple. They didn't just kind of hit a couple songs that are good like so many bands. There's just a song after song after song. And even though I think all the members, Joe Walsh, has some good songs, but I put, Don Henley and Glenn Frey. And I know they probably wrote some individually, but I'm putting them down as a kind of songwriting team. I don't know if they're as much a team as like Lennon and McCartney, but I kind of considered them a team for this. And they both had good solo careers. I particularly like Don Henley's solo career, but, obviously Glenn Frey had some huge hits. The Heat Is On, Smuggler's Blues. So number 4 is Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Now, I almost didn't include Elton John because I said I wasn't going to include singer-songwriters, and you could almost stick Elton John in there with singer-songwriters, like Joni Mitchell or, I don't know, Carole King. I mean, there's so many good songwriters that we lopped off the list by saying it was rock. But, then I thought, no, Elton John's rock. Elton John is rock and roll. I mean, like a lot of good rock artists, he can do all kinds of styles. He's very versatile, but he's a rock figure of rock music. And again, just go to an Elton John concert, just song after song. Even if you say you don't like Elton John, I bet right now you can name 10 Elton John songs off the top of your head without even trying, And they're all damn good songs. I mean, and I like Elton John, and particularly those, those sort of the classic period Elton John stuff. Of course, he's done good stuff right along, really. I think anytime you have an artist that's been in music for 50 or 60 years, you have patches of their career. Some are better than others, and maybe some albums that get a little uneven, but he's still good. I'm sure he's still good. And that album he did, was it Diver? Was a good album. It's a newer album, so he's still very active. And the other thing I wanted to say is Bernie Taupin. Elton John's gone through periods where he worked with other lyricists, and I think he worked with Tim Rice, who's Jesus Christ Superstar fame on The Lion King. But that Bernie Taupin stuff is extra great, and Bernie Taupin's one of those lyricists. You're never quite sure what he's saying sometimes, but it sounds good when he says it. And I think that kind of dreamlike quality of the Taupin lyrics, where it's kind of buzzy and fuzzy sometimes. It brings out the shadings and the nuances and the creativity in Elton John's piano, and it's just a great combination. you know. So Bernie Taupin just definitely deserves to be included when you talk about Elton John and songwriting. And Elton John is a rock artist. He's he's a lot of things. He's another one that he's another one. He's a celebrity. You know, articles talk about him, you know, shopping and how much money he spends, and he says kind of goofy things sometimes and dresses funny. And you almost forget how really good he is. I was going to say was, but is. But those albums he did, just that string of albums, right from Empty Sky and, you know, it was 1170 and just all those albums, just right on through, particularly through Blue Moves, they're just classic albums. I mean, and every song on those albums is great. So they're definitely on that list. Number 3, Pete Townshend of The Who. Definitely The Who, you know, and another band. The Who is another band that made that tradition. You listen to that transition from being kind of a TV appearance, you know, Suits, you know, British Invasion era band to stadium rockers. And again, that's a transition that a lot of the bands from the early and mid 60s never made. The Who made it great, you know. But a lot of that was the strength of Townshend's songwriting. They were able to go into that early 60s stuff because they had such good kind of radio hits. You know, there's a lot of discipline. That's, I think, where some of these guys, yeah, you can cut down like the 4-minute song. I think Pete even did himself. We were liberated from the 4-minute song. But let me tell you something. In 1965, when a radio guy said, I need a great song and it can only be 3 minutes long, it forced you to really be a good songwriter. And I think some of these guys that came out of that period, there was a craft to songwriting, and you heard a lot on AM radio, really, a lot of that AM radio, that music of that period, which some might call bubblegum, but a lot of it was really good songwriting. And when you've got 3 minutes to write a song, it better be good, and you don't have a lot of time to monkey around. And so Pete Townshend kind of came out of that. The Kids Are All Right, you know, and Can't Explain. Those are all kind of, they're rock. There's definitely rock, you know. And I imagine if you went out that night and saw them in a bar, you definitely know it was rock. But they were kind of radio friendly songs. But then when Tommy came out, they went in the direction that kind of we're more familiar with, which is that hard rock, stadium rock. And Tommy in particular is a really important album. Quadrophenia is my favorite Who album. But I would say if you look at sort of historical importance, if that matters, which I think it does, Tommy was one of the first really big albums that was like a concept album. It was a story. You know, it was like a rock opera. It influenced like Godspell, Jesus Christ Superstar. You know, it was Tommy and it was also kind of the beginning of progressive rock. So those were really interesting, creative things that Pete Townshend did, and again, all his songs are so well written, and you know they're well written because you can take however elaborate a Who song might be on Who's Next or whatever, with, you know, Keith Moon banging away and sometimes synthesizers and fiddle solos and all kinds of cool things, which I love. But you can take any one of those songs and you can play them on an acoustic guitar or piano and pare them right down. And that's because at the core, and that's what you can't do with a lot of bands. You know, like that Deep Purple album, I would say. But Pete Townshend, you could take all those great songs and you could peel everything away to just an acoustic guitar, and you can do any of those songs. In fact, I think Pete has done an album like that, right? But you take all those songs, Love, Rain O'er Me, Won't Get Fooled Again, you pare them all right down to practically nothing and just sit there and play with an acoustic guitar, and they're still great songs. And that again is a mark of a great song, not the performance. The other thing I want to say about Pete Townshend, I like his voice. I think I said this on another video, but all those songs, I'm not sure we would have heard them in the same way were it not for Roger Daltrey. So you take a song like Love, Rain O'er Me. I think Pete does sing on that, you know, and I like Pete Townshend's voice, but you took those great songs that he would write, you know, in his house or whatever, and then you'd hand them to Roger Daltrey, and you'd get these unbelievable, powerful, masculine, but yet sensitive vocals, you know, and Daltrey really brought out those songs. and that was a great pairing. But it was Townshend that wrote all those songs. Great songwriter. Number 2, we're getting to some of the obvious ones. You know, I'm not going to spoil anything by telling you number 1, but maybe you can see them in the back there. I'd be an idiot if I didn't put them at number 1. But number 2 is Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, which I guess makes some sense. Although sometimes I think we overlook what good songwriters they are, because again, they're great guitar band. They're fun. Jagger jumps around. Keith Richards has become kind of a funny grandfather to us. We laugh about him surviving cockroaches, and you know, but you know, those two men are very smart men. Don't ever forget that. And they wrote, and all those Stones songs that we hear all the time, again, are really well written songs. You know, and particularly the Mick Taylor years, which is my favorite period. But all the Stones era, they have such good songs, and they're so well written. And again, they're kind of like the Who or the Beatles. They came out of the early '60s, and they had to have short little commercial quality songs, even though they were rock and roll and blues and things. And I think they played a lot in the bar, you know, like the Stones that we know and love. But they would have to come up with nice little 3-minute long songs. And again, that some people might cut that down, and you know, it is kind of limiting, but it forces you to write good songs. That's where the rubber hits the road. And Jagger and Richards are able to write songs at that level, which in some ways is a higher level. You know, really, you know, you have some record company telling you, you know, I need a great song by next Tuesday, and it needs to be 3 minutes long, and you better come up with it, you know, or we're going to cancel your contract. You need to come up with something. My favorite story is a record company executive supposedly locked Keith Richards and Mick Jagger in a room in 1964 and said, "You boys need to write your own songs," because at that time they were doing a lot of like old blues songs and Chuck Berry and stuff. And they sat in a room for a while, and they wrote "As Tears Go By." But those early songs, which I don't think you hear as much, I grew up hearing them a lot. But like "Dandelion," "She Comes in Colors," "Ruby Tuesday," "As Tears Go By," those I would rank right with the Beatles. They're just really good songs. It's just in terms of songwriting. And then once, you know, the '60s kind of blossomed, and you had Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed and some of those albums coming out where they did more extended things, which was great. But underneath, you know, Gimme Shelter and Midnight, you know, Rambler, and you know, all that stuff was great songs. And of course, they like look at Tumbling Dice, Brown Sugar. Those are great guitar songs. It's great guitar playing. They're great rock classics. But you know, they're great. It's great songwriting. That's really, really good songwriting. So number 2 is the Stones, and it was close. Number 1, I've got a couple honorable mentions. There were so many. Fleetwood Mac. I love Fleetwood Mac. I was going to say Lindsey Buckingham. Then I thought, well, what about Stevie Nicks? And then I thought, well, what about if I put Stevie Nicks, then I should put Christy McVie. Those 3 in particular have written some really nice songs. And I got confused, and I thought, well, they are kind of a band effort, and so I didn't put them in the category, but they're definitely honorable mention. Another one is Robbie Robertson. Obviously, I felt kind of bad leaving him off because what great songs he wrote. But I do feel like after The Last Waltz, he just kind of drifted off to the mailbox to collect royalty checks, which who can blame him? It must be nice, but hasn't been all that active. Not even since the 80s or 90s, I mean, even, but really since the mid-70s, ever since The Last Waltz. He's done a couple things, some movie soundtracks and things, but so I didn't put him down, which in a way, you know, is kind of a disservice to him because I definitely like him. But this, you know, I couldn't put everybody on the list, and I didn't put him on, and that's the reason. The other one was Bob Dylan. I love Bob Dylan, but I feel like Dylan is kind of Dylan, you know, and his songs are Dylan. So I know he wrote like Mr. Tambourine Man, The Birds, Blowing in the Wind. Those are some great songs. But I do sort of feel like Dylan writes kind of in his extension of himself, which is awesome. I guess all songwriting is to an extent. But I felt like it was hard to kind of separate the songs from Dylan. the artist, and I was looking at just the songs per se, and so I didn't put him down, but he's definitely an honorable mention. And out of another list, a lot of other lists I could think of, he'd be in, at the upper tier. Number one, I'm not even going to say that much about them. Lennon and McCartney. Spoiler alert, but Lennon and McCartney. What are you going to say? Another example of a band that just, they were like the Dave Clark Five or all those bands back then. But what set them apart as time went on was just one song after another and after another. Especially when you started getting to like, Help and Rubber Soul and Revolver. They started just kicking out some of the greatest songs ever written. So I don't even want to say too much about it, obviously, because what can you say without going on and on? But Lennon and McCartney are number one, obviously, had to be. I wasn't going to try to do something kind of out of the box or, like some of these lists. It's Lennon and McCartney. But I tell you, the Stones are close. Beatles or the Stones, the ancient debate goes on. I think the Stones are close. And some of those other bands you might, but it's the Beatles for me. And I think even just almost scientifically or something, Lennon and McCartney, they're up there with Rodgers and Hammerstein as far as I'm concerned. And you'll know it now because you'll walk in a dentist office or an elevator and you'll suddenly realize, hey, that's Girl, or that's Eleanor Rigby, or those songs are so well written. You take away Lennon and McCartney, do them with anything else, they're still great songs. And McCartney's had a great career. He just released an album this week. I'm going to review it actually. And Lennon had a great solo career. I think he kind of had some dormant periods, but I really one of my favorite Lennon songs ever is Number 9 Dream. And Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which I think he did with Elton John. So those are solo career songs. Of course, Imagine. I get tired of hearing that sometimes, but it's a great song. But my favorite is Number 9 Dream. Just got that really creative kind of 70s feel to it. And I think Lennon would have continued, obviously, kind of like Ronnie Van Zant. He was cut down. And I'm a Christian man, but most days I would not wish well on Mark David Chapman. What a asshole, huh? Truly. Took away John Lennon from the world. Just imagine, we'd have had a Beatles reunion by now, I feel sure. But anyway, that's my top 10 list of songwriters. And if I could just leave with the final thought, it's just when we talk about music sometimes, I don't think we give enough credit to songwriting. And it's kind of there. It's what makes a band great, really, if you think about it. It's a critical factor. It's not just an important factor. And there are a lot of bands, I think, that play great, look great, are cool, have great guitarists, great instrumentals, but they don't have good songs. And if you think about the bands that we still know and love from classic rock, they're usually bands that had great songs. And a lot of these people I mentioned today, like I said about John Fogerty, I feel like some of these 200 years from now, people will be sitting around a campfire playing a lot of these songs. They might play them in a different style, even a different language or something, but they'll be around, just like we have music that's really old, today. That's how good that. So these are the songwriters. Thank you. God bless you. And I'm doing this on December 21st, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and yours. And I hope you consider subscribing to the channel.